Hey y'all, Farmer Dre back at it. Today, I'm going to show you guys exactly what I do to get my tomatoes ready for transplant. So, before I get started into that, you guys know that we went ahead and started tomatoes a lot earlier than usual. Our first frost-free date here in Southwest Missouri is April 15th. That's been the average for the past few years. And you know, a lot of people say May 1st just to kind of delay it back. But now it is the end of February. And as you guys can see here, the tomatoes are growing nicely. And we like to get tomatoes started early on. So the goal on our farm is to have our first ripe tomato by the first week of May. And the tomato plants now, they're about 6 to 8 inches tall. And we're going to go ahead and start transplanting them inside the big high tunnel by the end of this week. And before we do that, we got to harden them off and make sure they are ready to go, so that whenever we do transplant them, they don't get transplant shock and die. So I'm going to show you guys and explain to you guys exactly what we do and the most important thing to do whenever you do harden off your tomatoes or get them ready for transplanting time. So I'm going to go ahead and show you guys a tomato plant here, regular size. I mean, as you guys can see here, it's about 6 to 8 inches tall. It's got a few flower buds there. And most of the tomato plants already have a bunch of flower buds on them. The color on them is really good. I came through and fertilized them, you know, and they're growing nicely. And the first thing to keep in mind whenever you do want to transplant your tomatoes is to make sure they have all the fertilizer and all the energy they need. And by doing that 2 to 3 weeks before you want to transplant them out is to make sure you give them plenty of fertilizer so the color could be plentiful, so the color could be dark green and ready to go. And make sure you don't add too much so you won't burn them. And the second most important thing, and this is what I consider the most important thing whenever you transplant your tomatoes or getting ready to move them, is to be well watered. And that's exactly what I'm going to go ahead and do today. So before the end of the week comes by, they could be ready to go. So I'm going to go ahead and pull our water hose out and go ahead and irrigate them or just water them real heavily. Make sure there's plenty of moisture for them. If the plant is not wet enough and doesn't have enough moisture whenever you do plant them, then by the time you get water to them, after you do transplant them, you know, they could go through stress. And, you know, they're already going through a lot of stress whenever you move them back and forth. But if they're going through the stress of you moving them and they're going through water stress, then your chances of survival is a lot lower than it is whenever you do water them and make sure they're full of moisture. So I'm going to go ahead and jump outside to the hydrant, get the water hose, get everything ready to go, and I'm gonna go ahead and water them for the last time in here before we transplant them in the big high tunnel. So real quick before I get started, this is the first tunnel we're gonna go ahead and transplant tomatoes in. And if you guys have been watching my channel for quite some time, you guys know that we pulled the radiant heat in here, and that's our wood stove. It's a double barrel wood stove with the pump, and I could do a whole video on how our wood stove works and all that good stuff. But end of the week, we're gonna go ahead and transplant tomatoes in here, and we got to go ahead and get the wood stove started so we can start warming up the soil. And during the day, the average in here is about 60 degrees, so the soil is a lot warmer than the outside soil temperature. But you know, we still got to get a little warmer since tomatoes are a summer crop. They are a you know, they only grow during the summer mainly, and whenever you try to grow them this time of year, the conditions need to be perfect. I've been keeping the soil moist in here, and I've been flushing out the soil because we do use a lot of fertilizer, and we don't want to have salinization problems in the soil. So I've been doing that over the winter. And I should have planted a cover crop in here, like a winter wheat or some rye or something like that, but I just never came around to it. But if you guys look here, some of the seeds did germinate. The C4s did germinate. So there's some stuff growing. But, you know, a cover crop would have had a more benefit. But, you know, we didn't have time, and I didn't get the seed in time. So, you know, it is what it is. It's still going to work fine. So we're going to go ahead and start amending the soil in here, you know, probably starting tomorrow, and then work slowly every single day at it until we get ready to plant the tomatoes. But I'm going to go ahead and water the tomatoes in the greenhouse there. So this is what we use just to water tomatoes. It's just another fancy stuff. Not really fancy, just connect your end of the hose. We'll go ahead and pull it inside the greenhouse here. We should have pulled a hydrant in here, but we got excited whenever we built it and forgot that we needed water. I mean, who does that kind of stuff? But the water line's actually going right underneath the greenhouse there. So for us to pull the water line or hydrant inside the greenhouse there, wouldn't be too terrible of a job, but we just don't have it yet. So I always pull this water hose and it seems to be working. So before this stage, I was just watering tomatoes from up top, and I'm gonna go ahead and still do that, but I don't want tomato plants to suffer too bad because they're getting really tall. So I'm gonna try to go from the side here and try to water them as much as I can from the side and turn on max there and try shoving the water as deep as I can. Let all that air come out of there. Just kind of do that, and then if the tomatoes don't get wet from the top, it's a lot better for the plant health. So try to water them from the side, and then if I'm gonna have to at the end, just kind of go through and do the centers there, but just kind of making sure the soil is really moist. And you know, we use this potting mix, so it drains really well, so I'm not too scared about, you know, the plants holding too much water. Just like that. So you could go ahead and water your tomato plants from up top like this, but I'm not a big fan of this because the water gets too heavy and the tomato plants start falling over. So this is what happens whenever you put too much pressure from up top. The leaves get really heavy and start falling over there. So this is why I don't really like water from up top, but it's gonna go ahead and come back. But you know, whenever you see your tomato plants falling over, you kind of feel sorry for them and don't want to do it again. So, but not too bad. I mean, there's a lot of flower buds on these suckers already, so they're growing nicely. And like I said, end of the week, we're gonna go ahead and start transplanting. Yes, so making sure they're well watered is probably, in my opinion, the most important part whenever you transplant the tomatoes. And there's another key factor: make sure that the sun isn't shining too bad the day you do transplant them, because then the transplant shock is too great and then they could die. But overall, it's not that big of a deal. But you know, it's just, you know, being cautious of what's going on and how the tomato plants like it, and making sure they're nice and healthy. But if your tomato plants are well watered, well fertilized, then you shouldn't have a problem with them out in the field. And you know, the reason I don't want to water tomato plants from up top is that it could cause other diseases in the transplants. And that's why growing tomatoes in a tunnel is so profitable and so much better than growing them outside in the field, is that since there is no rain, the tomato plants puts all its energy into producing fruit instead of producing, you know, the energy to fight off different diseases and bacterias. And if you do get a disease inside of your tomato plants, then you're fighting that instead of the plant, you know, trying to put all its energy and nutrients inside the tomato. So it's just, you know, it's not too big of a deal whenever you get ready to transplant, but you know, I feel like it was a thing to mention. But tonight it's gonna get really cold, and I'm gonna go ahead and cover up the tomato plants. And we built a greenhouse on top of inside our greenhouse here, and I just got the heater a little wet, and we just have this little heater that warms it up and keeps it nice and warm. And you know, the only problem you see with this heater is that you could burn a few leaves, but it's not too bad. You know, I could sacrifice 2 or 3 tomato plants, you know, just plant a little more to have early tomatoes than to try to, you know, start them a little later and lose that 2 to 3 weeks of harvest. So I'm gonna go ahead and cover them for the night and plug in the heater, and they will be good to go. So just like that, tomato plants are ready. And like I mentioned, end of the week, we're gonna go ahead and start planting out in the big high tunnel. Alrighty, y'all, this is gonna be pretty much it for today. If you guys haven't already, go ahead, hit that subscribe and go smash that like button if you guys enjoyed today's video. Don't forget to hit that notification icon so you guys can be notified whenever I do upload a video. I want to say thanks for watching up to this point. You guys have a good day, and we will see you next time.